characters. You know, the Shaw character is a man of experience, and you don't get to do that in your 20s. You know, you need to build.
Jason Statham built his career on discipline, professionalism, and keeping drama away from the spotlight. But even Hollywood's toughest action star has limits. Over the years, several actors reportedly clashed with him, from creative disagreements to ego battles and very different work styles. Some tensions stayed behind the scenes, while others became harder to ignore. In this video, we'll look at 6 actors who reportedly ended up on Jason Statham's bad side, and why some of those relationships were never fully repaired. Shia LaBeouf. Few actors represent discipline quite like Jason Statham. Before becoming one of Hollywood's biggest action stars, he spent years as an athlete, training relentlessly and developing a reputation for showing up prepared. Directors and crew members have often described him as someone who treats filmmaking like a job that requires focus, consistency, and respect for everyone involved. He learns his choreography, arrives on time, and prefers to keep distractions to a minimum. For Statham, professionalism is not something that can be switched on when the cameras roll. It is a mindset that follows an actor throughout the entire production process. Shia LaBeouf developed a very different reputation. While many people recognize him as a talented performer capable of delivering powerful roles, he has also become known for his unpredictable behavior and intense commitment to his craft. Over the years, stories surrounding his unusual preparation methods, emotional outbursts, and controversial public appearances have followed him almost as closely as his acting career. Supporters argue that his willingness to push boundaries helps him create unforgettable performances. Critics, however, believe his approach often creates unnecessary complications for the people around him. Those opposite philosophies reportedly created a divide long before the two actors ever had a chance to work together. Statham values structure and control. LaBeouf has often embraced spontaneity and unpredictability. One prefers a carefully planned process, while the other seems comfortable allowing chaos to shape his creative choices. In Hollywood, where productions operate under tight schedules and enormous budgets, those differences can quickly become a source of tension. Even without sharing a film set, many insiders believed the two men represented completely different schools of thought when it came to acting and professionalism. According to reports that circulated within industry circles, discussions once took place involving a potential project that could have brought both actors together. The details remain unclear, and the film itself never moved forward. But stories about those early conversations continued to attract attention. Studio executives reportedly liked the possibility of pairing the established action star with the younger actor known for dramatic intensity. On paper, it seemed like an interesting combination, yet not everyone involved was convinced the partnership would work. Statham allegedly questioned whether LaBeouf was the right fit for the role being discussed. His concerns reportedly had less to do with talent and more to do with compatibility. For someone who values reliability and consistency, bringing an unpredictable personality into a demanding production may have appeared risky. Filmmaking requires collaboration, and even the most talented performer can become a challenge if their approach clashes with the rest of the cast and crew. Whether those concerns were justified or not, the reported disagreement quickly became one of the most talked about aspects of the unmade project. What may have started as a simple casting discussion reportedly grew into something much larger. Hollywood is a place where opinions travel quickly, and disagreements often gain momentum behind closed doors. Once word spread that Statham had reservations, speculation filled the gaps left by a lack of official information. Some believed the disagreement reflected deeper concerns about professionalism. Others viewed it as a clash between two performers who simply saw the craft of acting in completely different ways. Whatever the truth may have been, the possibility of collaboration quietly faded away. The situation became even more interesting because neither actor publicly launched a major attack against the other. There were no explosive interviews, dramatic confrontations, or social media battles. Instead, the tension existed mostly through reports, rumors, and subtle comments that hinted at a deeper divide. In many ways, that made the story more fascinating. Public feuds often burn brightly before disappearing, Quiet rivalries, however, can linger for years because neither side ever fully addresses them. At the heart of the reported conflict was a larger question about how actors should approach their work. Statham represents discipline, preparation, and efficiency. LaBeouf represents immersion, experimentation, and emotional unpredictability. Neither philosophy is guaranteed to produce better performances, but they often attract very different personalities. For some filmmakers, structure creates excellence. For others, creative freedom unlocks something special. The challenge comes when those worlds collide and neither side sees value in the other's approach. At least with Shia LaBeouf, the disagreement stayed mostly behind closed doors. The next actor, however, was attached to one of the biggest franchises in movie history: Vin Diesel. When Jason Statham stepped into the Fast franchise, it wasn't just about dropping in another action star into a thing that already worked. He sort of shifted the whole vibe, the dynamic, the way it moved. By the time he showed up, Vin Diesel had already put in years building everything around Dominic Toretto. And in the process, he turned the character into the center of one of Hollywood's most massive movie brands. Diesel wasn't merely a lead actor. No, he was tightly tied to where the franchise went, what it felt like, and what it would become long-term. Then Statham arrived, and with him came a different kind of voltage, a sharper energy. His version of Deckard Shaw brought this dangerous, self-assured, and extremely capable character, and pretty fast, it pulled audience attention. It felt like almost overnight, fans were already chatting about Shaw, like he was one of the most exciting add-ons the series had ever gotten. That popularity created a new situation for the franchise. Like, suddenly, there were two major stars that pulled focus whenever they shared the screen. Audiences really loved the chemistry and the tension between their characters, but then rumors popped up, saying that behind the scenes things weren't always as smooth as they seemed. Industry observers pointed out some subtle signs of creative disagreements, and honestly, it felt a bit noticeable once people started looking. Some reports claimed that conversations about character importance, screen time, and even story direction occasionally turned into friction. Whether those reports were fully accurate is still hard to verify, but they kept feeding years of speculation among fans who watched the franchise pretty closely. Part of it may have been because Statham and Diesel approached their characters in different ways. Diesel spent years shaping Dominic Toretto into this larger-than-life figure, where his presence often dominated the whole story.
Despite being offered $25 million to return to the role of Dominic Toretto, Vin Diesel passed on appearing in Too Fast, Too Furious, saying that the script he was offered was not connected enough to the first film's story.
Toretto was framed as a leader, a protector, and almost an unstoppable force. Statham's Deckard Shaw, though, arrived with another vibe. He was sharp, calculating, and often portrayed as equally dangerous. And unlike a lot of supporting characters who just kind of orbit around Toretto, Shaw had enough charisma and credibility to stand next to him. That then brought up questions about how both figures could coexist without one slipping into the shadows of the other. As the franchise kept expanding, it became harder and harder to ignore reports of creative disagreements. Some insiders alleged that, from time to time, tensions popped up about how certain scenes should play out, and also how particular characters ought to be portrayed. In a franchise that runs on larger-than-life action set pieces, even tiny tweaks could end up shifting how viewers read each character's role. There were rumors, too, that script rewrites sometimes slipped into the process, especially when it came to keeping a clear character hierarchy. Whether those stories were fully inflated or not, they kept adding to the notion that competing ideas were brewing off camera. For Statham, balance seemed like a key principle, at least to his public image. Across his career, he often gravitated toward roles that feel grounded, even when the abilities are extraordinary. His action approach leans on physical know-how, precision, and a kind of realism. Even in a universe where believability is regularly stretched, Statham often appeared to want his performances anchored to something that felt genuine. Some accounts claimed he liked a more shared back-and-forth style of storytelling, where multiple figures get chances to stand out, rather than one lone lead constantly taking over the narrative. If that was accurate, then his mindset might have clashed with what some people thought the Fast franchise was moving toward. Rumors about script rewrites and the way characters were positioned only seemed to, I don't know, crank up fan curiosity. Little stories kept sliding around, like scenes being tuned, dialogue getting reshaped, and action beats being planned with an almost obsessive care, so the image of some characters stays intact. None of it was ever fully confirmed, though. Not really, but it kept coming back again and again for people who were following the franchise closely. The more the series racked up success, the more every behind-the-scenes detail got treated like it mattered a lot. So yeah, even a small creative disagreement would get blown up into something that looked like a bigger power struggle. Then Hobbs and Shaw finally arrived and sort of added another odd chapter to all of this. On the surface, the spin-off looked like a pretty natural extension of the franchise. It gave Statham and Dwayne Johnson room to explore their characters through a separate adventure, while also delivering more of the action audiences already loved. But behind the curtain, many fans read the project as proof that key players were drifting into their own separate creative territory. By giving Shaw his own storyline, the franchise effectively lowered the pressure for direct clashes between the biggest personalities inside the main run. Steven Seagal. Few rivalries in the action movie world have generated as much curiosity as the reported tension between Jason Statham and Steven Seagal. On the surface, both men belong to the same genre. They built careers around fighting, martial arts, and tough guy characters capable of defeating entire armies without breaking a sweat. Yet, beneath that similarity lies a dramatic difference in philosophy. Statham and Seagal represent two completely different visions of what an action star should be. For many fans, that contrast explains why the relationship between them reportedly became so strained over the years. Jason Statham has always emphasized preparation, physical conditioning, and practical action. Long before he became a movie star, he trained as an athlete and developed the discipline that would later define his career.
High level of commitment from everybody else. There's a high level of expectation from the director. Everybody wants to do something better than they've done the last time.
Even after achieving success in Hollywood, he continued performing many of his own stunts and remained heavily involved in the physical side of filmmaking. Directors frequently praised his work ethic, while audiences appreciated the grounded style he brought to action scenes. Whether he was fighting hand-to-hand or performing dangerous sequences, Statham built his reputation on making things feel believable. That commitment to realism became one of his strongest trademarks. Steven Seagal followed a very different path. During the late 1980s and early 1990s, he became one of the biggest action stars in the world. His movies earned millions, and his martial arts background helped separate him from other actors in the genre. However, over time, Seagal also became one of the most controversial figures in action entertainment. Stories about his behavior, exaggerated claims, and larger-than-life self-image began to overshadow his accomplishments. Critics increasingly questioned whether his reputation matched reality, while many industry veterans openly challenged some of the stories surrounding his career. That growing controversy reportedly made Seagal a symbol of everything Statham wanted to avoid becoming. Statham carefully cultivated an image built on professionalism and authenticity. He rarely made grand claims about himself and generally allowed his work to speak for itself. Seagal, on the other hand, often found himself at the center of dramatic stories and heated criticism. To observers, the contrast was impossible to miss. One actor appeared focused on discipline and continuous improvement. The other seemed increasingly associated with ego, self-promotion, and controversy. Whether fair or not, that perception helped fuel the divide between them. The situation gained even more attention when comments began surfacing that appeared to question Seagal's credibility. Over the years, Statham became known for speaking honestly when discussing action films and martial arts. While he rarely engaged in personal attacks, some of his remarks were widely interpreted as criticism of performers who relied more on image than substance. Fans and media outlets quickly connected those comments to Seagal, especially given the ongoing debates surrounding Seagal's standing within the action community. Every statement added another layer to the growing narrative. What made the story even more interesting was the number of people within the industry who seemed to echo similar concerns. Stunt professionals, martial artists, and fellow actors occasionally voiced criticism that mirrored points often associated with Statham's perspective. Some questioned Seagal's later film work. Others challenged stories about his abilities or behavior. As those criticisms accumulated, the reported feud stopped feeling like a disagreement between two actors and started representing a larger debate within the action genre itself. It became a discussion about authenticity, credibility, and what audiences should expect from their action heroes. The media naturally embraced the story. Anytime Statham or Seagal made comments that could be interpreted as criticism, headlines quickly followed. Fans picked sides. Online discussions exploded. Some defended Seagal as a pioneer who helped popularize martial arts in Hollywood. Others argued that Statham represented a new generation focused on realism and professionalism. The more attention the feud received, the more symbolic it became. It was no longer just about two men. It was about two different eras of action cinema competing for legitimacy. Despite years of speculation, there has never been a meaningful public reconciliation. No widely publicized meeting took place. No joint interviews attempted to clear the air. No collaborative project brought them together. In an industry where feuds are often resolved through carefully managed public appearances, the silence between Statham and Seagal has been striking. Neither side appears particularly interested in repairing the relationship. Instead, both have continued moving forward along separate paths. 3 names down, and the disagreements have mostly centered on ego, control, and reputation. But the next actor brought something entirely different to the table. Jared Leto. Among all the reported clashes that are somehow tied to Jason Statham, few are as fascinating as the one that involved Jared Leto. Unlike some of the other names on this list, the tension there wasn't built around action scenes, franchise politics, or even a simple fight for screen time. Instead, it reportedly grew from something much deeper. And yeah, it feels like it did. At its core, there was a disagreement about acting itself. Both men achieved tremendous success in Hollywood, yet they got there through totally different methods. One was basically all discipline, efficiency, and practicality. The other became known for full immersion, transformation, and an intense devotion to character. When those two worlds briefly leaned toward each other, the outcome seemed almost unavoidable. Friction was coming, even if it wasn't said out loud. According to industry stories that sort of floated around for years, the divide started during early chats about a possible project. The exact details, though, stay a bit murky. Reports implied that both actors were somehow linked to talks about appearing in the same film. At first, it all looked decent. Producers were keen on pairing 2 acclaimed performers, each with very separate kinds of strengths. On paper, it read like a fascinating creative pairing. But allegedly, those first conversations showed right away how far apart their ways really were, even before a camera had started rolling. Jared Leto has been tied for a long time to method acting and that deeper character immersion thing. Over the course of his career, the stories about how he prepares seem to make headlines nearly as often as the work itself. He has talked openly about vanishing into roles and letting a character shape his behavior well before cameras ever start. Fans interpret that as proof of superhuman commitment. Critics, on the other hand, sometimes call it too much effort or something that pulls attention away. Still, no matter what side you lean toward, there's not much room for doubt that Leto brings an intensity to acting that only a few performers even try to match. For someone like Jason Statham, that kind of approach reportedly felt unnecessary, like it just didn't need to go that far. Statham has never really presented himself as an actor who has to live as a character 24 hours a day. Instead, he seems to see acting as a profession that demands preparation, focus, and execution. He trains, learns the scenes, does the stunts, and gives the production what it needs. While he respects hard work, he has often looked skeptical at techniques that blur the line between performance and reality. In his mind, the whole point is to make the audience believe the character exists, not to convince yourself that you have actually become the character. That difference in philosophy reportedly became obvious pretty quickly. Stories started to circulate suggesting that Statham wasn't impressed by what he considered method acting taken too far. Some actors seemed to admire full immersion, but Statham allegedly viewed it as an unnecessary complication. He felt that a production already has plenty challenges to manage, without performers turning normal everyday interactions into extensions of their roles. Whether those reports were entirely accurate is still uncertain, but they do fit a pattern many observers had already noticed about both men. They just came at the craft from opposite directions. The contrast became even more apparent when you look at how each actor defines success. Leto often talks about transformation, and he values becoming someone completely different, going into unusual emotional territory and pushing creative boundaries. To him, acting looks like a process of discovery. Each role becomes a chance to vanish, and then come back as someone new. That kind of commitment has earned him critical acclaim and a devoted following from people who enjoy bold artistic risks. Statham's philosophy is sort of almost the reverse. He leans toward clarity, discipline, and reliability, you know. His on-screen work seems built on precision more than on any big transformation. Rather than slipping away into wildly different identities, he zeroes in on keeping characters believable through the same consistency and a kind of authenticity that doesn't wobble. Acting, for him, is less like some experiment and more like a craft that improves with repetition and hard work. Neither path is automatically right or wrong, but they rarely end up with the same outcome on what a production should actually feel like. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. When Jason Statham joined the Fast franchise, he quickly established himself as one of the most dangerous and charismatic figures in the series. But there was already another larger-than-life personality dominating the action landscape. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson had become one of the franchise's biggest attractions, bringing immense popularity, physical presence, and star power to every scene he entered. The moment both men shared the same cinematic universe, fans immediately recognized the potential. On-screen, they looked like the perfect rivals. Off-screen, however, reports suggested that putting two powerful personalities together was never going to be simple.
You know, there was so many lines that I was improvising with Jason, and Jason's got the best sense of humor. I mean, he looks tough, and he is tough, but I love cracking him up.
Unlike some of the other reported feuds connected to Statham, the tension surrounding Johnson was not rooted in personal dislike. Instead, it appeared to grow naturally from competition. Both actors built careers around projecting strength, confidence, and dominance. Both had loyal fan bases. Both were capable of carrying major action films on their own. When performers of that stature enter the same franchise, comparisons become unavoidable. Every scene becomes a measuring stick. Every action sequence becomes a debate. Fans begin asking who is tougher, who is more popular, and who deserves the spotlight. Those questions can create pressure, even when everyone involved remains professional. From the beginning, audiences were fascinated by the contrast between Deckard Shaw and Luke Hobbs. Statham's Shaw relied on speed, precision, and calculated aggression. Johnson's Hobbs represented an overwhelming force and relentless determination. Their personalities clashed just as effectively as their fighting styles. That chemistry helped create some of the franchise's most memorable moments, but it also fueled growing rumors about behind-the-scenes tension. Reports began circulating that creative discussions sometimes became complicated because neither character was supposed to appear weaker than the other. The challenge became especially noticeable whenever fight scenes were involved. In most action movies, determining the winner of a confrontation is relatively straightforward. In a franchise packed with major stars, however, the situation can become much more complicated. Reports emerged suggesting that certain actors had contractual protections regarding how their characters could be portrayed during physical confrontations. These clauses allegedly influenced everything from who landed punches to how much damage a character could absorb. Whether every rumor was accurate remains unclear, but the stories became a major topic among fans and entertainment reporters. For stunt coordinators and filmmakers, that created a unique challenge. Their job was no longer simply designing exciting action sequences. They also had to ensure that every major character maintained a certain image. If one star appeared too dominant, another could appear weakened. If one actor lost too decisively, fans might view the character differently moving forward. As a result, even simple fight scenes reportedly required extensive planning. Every punch, throw, and takedown had to be carefully balanced to satisfy everyone involved while still entertaining audiences. Jason Statham himself reportedly joked about the situation at times, suggesting that some action scenes felt more like negotiations than fights. While those comments were often delivered with humor, they highlighted the unusual reality of managing a franchise filled with powerful personalities. Johnson faced the same challenge. As one of Hollywood's biggest stars, he had his own image to protect. Neither man wanted to appear vulnerable, and both represented valuable assets to the franchise. Maintaining that balance became an important part of the filmmaking process. The reported tension reached a point where many observers began wondering whether separating the characters might actually benefit the franchise. Behind the scenes, however, many insiders believed the project also served another purpose. By giving Hobbs and Shaw their own movie, the studio could capitalize on their popularity without forcing constant competition within the main franchise. The names we've covered so far were all major stars, yet none of them reportedly frustrated Jason Statham, quite like the man taking the #1 spot. Mark Wahlberg. Among all the reported conflicts tied to Jason Statham, the story with Mark Wahlberg really stands out because it goes back farther than most people actually think. Unlike a few other names on this same list, Wahlberg wasn't linked to some quick disagreement, a rumored casting snag, or a confrontation that showed up years later after both actors were already major stars. Their work together started early, when both men were involved in one of the most successful action movies from the early 2000s. At first glance, everything looked positive. The film did well, the audiences seemed into the cast, and both actors kept stacking up impressive careers. But underneath, the reports suggested differences were already starting to show up, kind of quietly at first. The base of their relationship was laid during the production of The Italian Job. The movie brought together a talented ensemble, and it demanded steady cooperation to get those elaborate heist sequences to function. Statham was still kind of building his footing in Hollywood back then, while Wahlberg had already developed a reputation as a leading man who could shoulder major productions. Teaming up felt like a natural match. Both actors had action credentials, both carried a sense of assurance on screen, and both were seen as rising momentum inside the industry. Still, similar backgrounds can sometimes cause tension, rather than smooth harmony. Wahlberg reportedly brought a different energy to the set. While no one really questioned his talent or ability to perform, some accounts suggested that his approach was more relaxed and less rigid. He seemed to balance acting with business ventures, personal commitments, and a broader set of interests outside filmmaking. For some people, that sort of flexibility showed confidence. For others, it occasionally created frustration. If Statham viewed the set as a place for complete concentration, Wahlberg appeared more comfortable juggling multiple priorities at the same time, like it wasn't a single lane. Those differences may have seemed minor initially, but they reportedly planted the seeds for— those differences maybe seemed minor at the start, but they supposedly planted the seeds for later tension. A successful production usually relies on people who share expectations that are pretty similar, you know? When one performer really values strict discipline and another leans toward a looser approach, small misunderstandings can grow pretty fast. Neither side has to come in with bad intentions. They just define professionalism differently, almost like it's a separate language. Over time, those little gaps become harder to ignore, even when everyone tries. Supposedly, that is exactly what happened between Statham and Wahlberg. At least according to some reports, Wahlberg cultivated a different image. He managed to move himself from entertainer to businessman, and somehow also built an impressive portfolio of investments and business ventures. His public presence expanded well beyond acting. Many people admired his entrepreneurial success, but others wondered if it matched the blue-collar persona he often projected. Reports indicate that this contrast became a point of criticism from Statham. The controversy wasn't just about wealth or even winning big. It was more about how authentic it all felt. Statham reportedly thought that public image should mirror reality pretty closely. Wahlberg, on the other hand, seemed comfortable juggling multiple identities at the same time, like it was normal. And then that disagreement, it pushed the tension outside the usual boundaries of movie sets, production schedules, all of that. It turned into a bigger philosophical split about image, branding, and the way celebrities show themselves to the world. Statham looked skeptical of personas that are carefully curated, almost polished too neatly. Wahlberg embraced the opportunities that came with building a wider business empire. Neither stance is automatically wrong, but they point toward very different values. So once again, the conflict was less about one particular incident and more about opposing worldviews. Simple as that. Jason Statham's reported conflicts with these 6 actors reveal more than celebrity drama. Each story highlights a deeper issue involving professionalism, ego, artistic differences, and competing personalities. Let us know which clash surprised you the most. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Hollywood stories. And stick around for the next video on your screen, because the drama behind the cameras is often even more fascinating than what audiences see on them.